The key with the controller is that it does not have any configuration when you get it for the first time, pretty much like an access point. So you need to provide that initial configuration. And it's more complicated than an access point because the AP needs what? An IP address, and that's pretty much it. But a controller needs a lot more than that. It may need an IP address, of course, but it may also need some information about what country you're in, who is the admin, how do you connect to the controller, what kind of channels should be allowed, what kind of band, etc. So it's a bit more than just an access point. So you need to run through an initial setup script to configure the initial parameters of that controller. Depending on the controller you run and the code you run, you may have different options. In all the controllers, always, there is one possibility, which is to use the CLI setup. And in this setup, you connect the console port to whatever console port is available on the controller, you fire up the controller, and at the end of the initial boot sequence, the controller is going to wait with a prompt for you to answer several questions. And we'll show you this script in a few minutes. That is always possible. It is not always very handy and very practical because it's a CLI, so you need to have some console connection somehow, so you need to have some equipment, plus you need to know what is supposed to be answered to some of those questions. So starting from code 8.0, the 2504 has another option, which is called the WLC Express Setup. And what this does is that it allows you to connect to any of the 4 ports at the front of your 2504. And when the initial boot sequence terminates, your controller is going to switch into a mode where it's going to provide IP addresses to any device that connects to those ports, and that would be your laptop. And it's going to provide you with a graphical interface through which you'll be running this initial setup. You can also, if you want to, connect an access point to port 3 or 4 of the 2504. And the reason why you connect to one of these 2 ports is that these 2 ports provide PoE. So those APs will not even need a power brick. You just plug them, they will be powered by the controller, they will receive their configuration from the controller, and they are going to also advertise a sort of initial SSID to which you can connect using a laptop if you don't have a cable. And using that connection, you can still connect to the controller and run this WLC Express setup. What is special about this Express setup is that it not only allows you to fill up the information you need for initial configuration, but the way it's done is very simple. You have 2 pages. We ask you a very basic number of questions, and what is great is that as we apply the configuration to your controller, we are also going to apply good practices. That is to say, automatically enable things that we think are good in your network. Also, we're not going to ask you things which are too technical. We're going to fill this information for you. So the WLC Express setup is a great way to set up a controller in a very easy and efficient manner, because not only you don't have a lot to fill in, but on top of that, the information you put is going to automatically be the right configuration because we'll apply good practices. Be careful. This is the WLC Express setup in CCNA Wireless running code 8.0. This is only available in 2504. In later codes 8.1 and others, the larger platforms 5508 and the others also have the possibility to use the WLC Express setup, not in 8.0. And the warning is here because on the 5508 and the larger controllers as well, you remember the service interface port that you have on the side? You can connect here and you can get a graphical interface as well. And you can use this graphical interface to do an initial setup. But this is not the WLC Express setup. What this is on the service port is basically the graphical version of the CLI setup. So you will get the same amount of questions and you will have to answer technical information as well to configure the controller. There is not much difference between the CLI setup and the service interface setup. It's the same set of questions, the only difference is the interface. In one case, it's a cable and a web interface. In the other case, it's a console connection and a CLI interface, but the questions are the same. So those are one category, and the WLC Express setup is another very different category because of the simplified question set and because of these good practice implementation straight into your configuration. All right, let's get on to 2504 and look how those interfaces look.